Welcome back to Girl Take the Lead, the podcast where we reimagine leadership, challenge the status quo, and have the real conversations that help us break cycles, claim our voice, and lead from intention. And I'm your host, Jo Canny. If you've ever waited around to be promoted, if you've ever assumed your hard work would speak for itself, or if you've ever felt that you were next in line only to realize no one actually was communicating the plan to you, this conversation is going to resonate. Today, we're exploring something powerful and often overlooked: professional equity. Not just working hard, not just being good at your job, but intentionally building reputation, relationship, and results in a way that positions you to lead and to move. And I am so pleased to welcome Dr. Karen Hills Pruden, CEO of Pruden Global Business Solutions Consulting, best-selling author, global leadership speaker, and creator of the Professional Equity Framework. With more than 30 years of experience, including 17 years in senior leadership and the C-suite, Dr. Pruden brings both heart and strategy to what it means to build influence that lasts. This conversation is practical, honest, and empowering because leadership isn't about the title we hold. It's about the equity we build. So let's dive in. Here you go. Well, Karen, welcome to Girl Take the Lead. So glad you're here and that we could have this great conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So why don't we start? Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself to our listeners, so that they get, what you're up to and why you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a servant leader by heart, someone who has a history that has spanned about 3 decades, coming up on my 30th year. And interesting enough, I have been an entrepreneur, meaning I work for someone else, as well as an entrepreneur for the bulk of those 30 years. And so I've had the benefit of having both of those lanes. Started off in corporate America at the front line, made my way all the way up to the C-suite, where I remain and have been in senior leadership for the last 17 years. And as I mentioned previously, I'm a servant leader by heart. I am all things girl power. So I'm
Yahoo!
all about, I have a community that's called Sister Leaders, that is really a community for the elevation of women professionals who want to sustain themselves in business and elevate their career, as well as it's a network that is interested in sharing information, so that women can acquire those senior leadership positions as well. And so I'm really, as I mentioned, a servant leader who have had a blessed career, and now I'm willing to share that information so others can have a fulfilling and blessed career as well.
Mm. Well, a couple of things there. What were some of the challenges you faced to stay in the C-suite for that long? I mean, I made it to the C-suite, but I kind of lost the drive after a while because it was like, you know, I don't really want to do this, but I know for women though, we get challenged with so much going on in our lives. It seems like you found a way to navigate that. How did you do it?
Well, yeah, I have just a little bit. So I've worked for full transparency. I have worked for six different industries. I have been in senior leadership in four of those six different industries. So that helps when you kind of move around just a little bit. I keep my passion because I really do love business and love people. And you got to kind of love both of them in order to sustain yourself. And when I say love people, you have to love people at their worst moment, you know, and you have to be willing to hang in there with business, when you can't even see the end of the road, when you're going through difficulty times, whether it's customer situation or financial situation or system situations. And so I am a problem solver by nature. I like to not only find problems, but I like to provide recommendations for problems. And so I tend to thrive where there's problems, ironically. And most people tend to fizz out when there's problems because with problems come chaos. But I have a tendency to thrive and be able to get the best out of people during times of, I call it corporate chaos.
Mhm.
And so I think that has plays a little role into my sustainability
Ah,
because if anything is constant in business, it is change and change in people and change in the market.
huh. And have you seen that with your clients too? That it sounds like finding a particular lane that you are really good at. Is that what you kind of help and see with your clients that if they can find, I call that almost like a personal brand, that they find that within themselves.
Yes, absolutely. So, for those who are able to partner with me so that I can assist them, whether it's their business or their career, with my clients, I require that they have a specialty. So, if the specialty has not been identified prior to them coming to me, then that's one of the things that's on our to-do list. And I do operate with a number of different custom frameworks. For instance, one of my custom frameworks is the PE, which is the professional equity framework, which really is three components. You have reputation, you have relationships, and then you have area expertise. And the reason why that I call that framework professional equity is because if you know how equity is used in other situations, like maybe real estate, land, or things that appreciate in value, it is something that empowers professionals to leverage
Mhm.
when they want to leverage it. And so it is those three things. If you leverage relationships, meaning that if you have a relationship, I deal with a lot of senior leaders. And so if you have a relationship with people up and down the chain, as a senior leader, you aren't doing the work. It's the people that are under you, and no, generally it's multi-level people who are doing the work. And so you need to have a relationship with those individuals so they can communicate up, you
Mhm.
know, what is really and truly going on, not just what you think is going on. And so you have to have a relationship with people up and down the chain, regardless of title. Um, Reputation is, what are people saying about you? How do people feel about you? Because that will determine what they would share with you. And, you know, if your reputation or value is in the negative, then that will limit who approaches you, who come to you, and what they share with you. But if you have a positive reputational value, meaning that people like who you are, like what you stand for, believe you're someone who's integral, then they will bring information to you in hopes that you will help them solve the problem or at least provide a recommendation to solve a problem. And so that is why reputation is important. And then area expertise is when you get into move away from management, which is a task situation, into leadership, which is visionary. You want to have an identifiable area expertise that everybody knows this is your expertise. And how this is helpful in your career is that when that skill set is needed throughout the company, you will be the go-to person already identified with the person who can prescribe something to address that issue. And so it's very important for the people that I work with to identify what is your secret sauce, what is your specialization, what are people saying about you when you aren't in a room, and what type of relationships do you have. And so professional equity is something that I help my clients identify when they come work with me.
Ah, how do you see that versus superpower?
Well, your superpower is something that is innate. It is naturally given to you and it is activated without you trying. It is just something that, people, there's this phrase what people used to say, oh, she has a way with words or he has a way with words. It is your superpower is something that is you can't necessarily learn in school, you can't get with another degree. It is something that is innately part of you that you utilize as you're interacting with individuals. that brings out the best in people, that add value to every conversation in every room that you enter. And one of the things, I have this saying that says that silence is not a superpower. And so I believe that we as women, we expect women leaders, we expect people to acknowledge all of our hard work and see us, and without talking about our wins. And so we still have to enter rooms and talk about our wins and verbalize our receipts. And it's not bragging. I've worked with some male leaders who I know everything they did all the way back to kindergarten, so it's not bragging, but it is merely just sharing your track record of successes to individuals who may not be aware of those track records, so that they know that they can look to you to address those things if they come up in the future. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what a superpower is.
So I've always said that my superpower was that I cared. Like you put me in a room with other people, and what they're going to say when I leave is that I cared a lot about what was happening. But what would you say was your superpower?
Mine's is relationships.
Ah,
I because I talk to everyone, I am the person who knows not everything, but I know a lot. And then people will say, "Well, how do you know that?" And I'll say, "Oh, Stan the janitor told me. He overheard or whatever." And it's from the most unlikely source, but it is from a valid source that I get information, because I literally listen and talk to everyone. I make time for people, and I'm in the moment. I'm not multitasking when they're talking to me. I'm not looking at my phone. Um, and because of those relationships, people feel valued. They go the extra mile. They
yeah.
volunteer when needed. You know, um, I'm able to get a lot of things done with them just volunteering, as opposed to I don't have to dangle. It's not transactional. My relationships are not transactional. And so, yeah, relationships are my superpower, definitely.
Right. Were you in positions where you got to really use that power? Like what
Oh,
teams
absolutely.
were you
Because
in? Yeah.
yeah, so head of HR. So I've
Okay.
been head of human resources for 28 years. My background is human resources and operations. As a head of HR, I am the person I not only bring people into organizations, but I follow them throughout the life of their tenure with the organizations, through their training, through their succession planning, maybe through some performance management. I also am aware of how their jobs are changing, how the business is changing. I'm aware of the processes that change, that impact employees. Because I've been associated with HR, and I also have a innate interest in business, just business in general. I am that HR leader who not only knows the business, but I also know the people who operate the business, because your talent is your most valuable resource in any business. Don't let anybody tell you it's IT. It is not. It is not technology. It is your people, because technology cannot run itself. People still run technology.
Yeah. So I guess that's your point of view too about the emergence of AI coming into business.
Yeah, I love AI. I wish there was not so much fear associated with it. Um, as being in senior leadership, my job hasn't changed in terms of AI, because my job is problem solver and strategist. That doesn't change. AI is a tool maybe to do some of that,
Mhm.
but AI cannot tell me the talents of my people in my particular organization. AI cannot tell me whether or not we're using our system capabilities fully, or if we're partially using them, because we have all these multiple systems that don't talk to one another.
Yeah.
AI cannot tell me whether or not we have inefficient processes that people aren't using because our employees don't trust them. So, as a leader, our job does not change from artificial intelligence. It's just a tool that some of our employees can use to get their job done. but we're still in the problem solving and strategizing business, which means that we need to specifically know our business and our particular organization to be able to prescribe recommendations for that particular organization.
Uh-huh. That's terrific. A lot of leaders don't, I don't think, have the same enlightened view that you just stated. So thank you for putting that out there. That's really
Well, there's
good.
a term, it's a term for it. It's called the wisdom economy. Wisdom economy. We still have to have the knowledge how to run the business, even with the invention of AI.
One of the things that I imagine in your position is that you do hear a lot of people coming and talking about their bosses and about how challenging it can be to work with somebody. How about yourself? Have you had those challenging bosses, and what advice would you give people if they're in that situation?
Absolutely, I've had challenging bosses. I mean, I think most people have had challenging bosses. I have two that come to mind anytime anyone even used the word challenge and boss together in a sentence. And I outlived both of them, so but what advice I would have for someone who has a challenging boss, depending on the challenge, by all means, don't let anyone do anything illegal, against policy or anything. Go to the higher ups and report it if those things are happening to you. But if it is just a difference in leadership style, work style, um, if it's not against policy, if it's not against the law, we certainly have to know how to get along with different personalities. I once worked with a very moody boss. It's not against the law for a boss to be moody,
Right.
but it can make for a very difficult work environment on those moody days. And so, I learned how to read the signals of how she was feeling, and then if it was one of those days where, she came in from a meeting with the higher ups and she slammed her door, that was an indicator. When she slammed her door, that means she didn't want to be bothered. No matter what you had going on, she didn't want to be bothered. It had the building needed to be on fire for you to knock on that door if she came from a meeting and slammed her door. But I learned to read the signals, and then I learned to determine what was necessary to have a conversation with now, what I needed now, what can be held off until later, and what I just needed to make my best decision based on my role and handle on my own. And I have applied that with other bosses as well. When you learn their mannerisms, if they're not doing anything against the law, illegal, against policy, we have to be able to get along with people who are different, even though they're difficult, because difficult and challenging bosses aren't against the law. Figure out how to work with them, figure out how to communicate with them, pick and choose the battles that you step into with them, recognizing that there's an authority there.
Yeah.
They trump you. Um, and then learn where your middle ground is, but we all have to work with challenging people. And so I've had some, but again, because they were challenging for me, they were challenging just in general for their peers to work with. And I actually outlived them. I had two very challenging bosses that didn't last a year. The
That was
one was
well,
with the company for
that's
eight
victory
months,
in
one was with
itself.
the company for 9 months. And so I outlived them because again, if I find them challenging,
Yeah.
then other people found them challenging as well.
Yeah. 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 And I loved the thought of your victories, like you looked at success as being, okay, I'm just going to take it a day at a time, just learn what I need to learn here, keep going. And
Hmm.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you can learn from challenging bosses too.
Oh, absolutely.
I've learned from some challenging bosses. Again, it's not all bad. It
Yeah,
just feels bad on when they're going through what they're going through. I'll say having their episode or whatever it is.
yeah,
But it's not all bad. But one of my most challenging bosses I learned a lot from.
yeah.
It's just that she wasn't easy to work with.
Yeah. So did a mentor help you at all? Or how, I mean, I think that seems to be one way that we can really learn to keep a
Yeah.
perspective with the mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my first interaction with a mentor was a paid mentor, actually, who wasn't in the business. When I wanted to move from middle management to senior leadership, I recognized that there was a difference between middle management and senior leadership. So I wanted someone to look over my resume, kind of tell me if I was ready. And I didn't know anybody. I was looking for a female leader who had been in the C-suite for at least 10 years. I didn't personally know anyone. And so this was a little less than 20 years ago, and LinkedIn was very new on town. As a matter of fact, LinkedIn was the new baby on the block of social media. And so we were still filling LinkedIn out. And so I went up on LinkedIn and found a African American, because I happen to be African American woman who was in the C-suite who had been there for 10 years, sent her a copy of my resume and told her I was looking for a mentor. And I sent off two communication, direct messages, asked them to be my mentor. And my number one choice got back to me. And she said she would be my mentor for $350 an hour.
Ooh,
Now, and this was almost 20 years ago. So
yeah.
your girl wasn't really rolling like that. So I didn't have a whole bunch of $350 an hour. But what I did was I did negotiate and asked her, look, I can only afford one 350. Can we do 1 hour a month? Because her mentoring contracts were for 1 year. And she said yes. And so we signed a contract. She didn't cut me off at 60 minutes. And it wasn't an in-person mentorship. It was Zoom. It was telephone most times. Um, and she helped me identify what I call it my secret sauce is. So my specialties are technology and analytics.
Mhm.
I'm a numbers person because I've always worked in HR and it's not a revenue generating department.
Yeah.
I always had to justify my budget. And so I had a knack for creating formulas that could be validated to justify the work that my staff was doing that prevented my budget from being cut. And she said, if you can do that for HR, you can do that for any non revenue producing department. That is your secret sauce. And so all she did was help me learn how to tell the story of what I did using analytics, using formulas to show the work of my staff through storytelling. Because she said nobody wants to be read to or preached to. And as you become leaders, you need to provide snippets of performance to boards or to your shareholders. She said they have the attention span of a kindergartner. So it has to be in short sound bites. And so she helped me incorporate storytelling into my leadership competency to show my workplace performance. And so after working with her for 1 year, I was invited to apply for a C-suite position. Um, Went through the 4 month process, and I have literally been in senior leadership ever since then.
It is so terrific. It is so terrific to hear that. Well, you
Yeah,
took to heart everything that she was saying and implemented it and took action and learned.
absolutely. And I mean, that's what I was in search of. I needed someone to tell me what to do or tell me
Yeah.
what not to do anymore or something. I needed some type of guidance because I didn't know anyone who was in senior leadership. But I did know that managers do tasks, leaders are visionary. I did know that. I knew that they weren't synonyms for each other, and I knew that they required different competencies.
Mhm.
And she helped me with that. And true enough, it is true because I'm already planning 3 to 5 years down the road, whereas my managers are thinking about what they're going to complete this week.
Yeah.
I'm planning things for the organization in my area 3 to 5 years down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. The visionary skill is really important. And kind of like you, I had the analytics and the creativity kind of as a combination. That was kind of my secret sauce to go in and to develop and launch new products because I could see how the market was going to go and then put something in there and Um, but I don't think I ever had a mentor the way that you did. And boy, that sure would have been helpful. So
Oh,
people go
absolutely,
and get one.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had plenty since that first original one, and I wish they were $350 an hour now. So but yeah, you want someone who's already walked the walk and performed the work, who can tell you, can help accelerate your process and your problem solving as you get in that space.
So let's go with that a little bit more. You're in the space, you're in the C-suite. What were the kinds of challenges that you would talk with that mentor about to help you navigate and probably still have to navigate? It isn't like you get in there and then you're
Yeah,
in there forever,
yeah,
right? It's like there's
yeah.
power involved, there's a lot of pressure, politics change, strategy changes, company changes. I mean, how did you navigate that?
So we talked about, I like all things business. And so I can see something in your area that is not my area. Um, and we talked about really how to understand the business, but stay in your lane.
Mm,
You know, don't be, once you got into the C suite, once I got into senior leadership, she said, I know you love business and you have a business background, but sometimes you have to stay in your lane and let them figure it out. And that was difficult for me in the beginning because, again, my background is business, and I understood maybe a recommendation or a cure. And so, what I would do is I would befriend individuals in those areas where I knew I had possibly some recommendations for, and try to have casual conversations with them to where I could share information without them feeling like I was trying to tell them how to run their area.
yeah.
um but I was that's what make that's been my sustainability in senior leadership, is because I understand all things business, the front of the house and the back of the house.
Mm-hmm.
um, and not a whole lot of people understand the front of the house. The front of the house is your customer service, your front facing, public facing positions. And then the back of the house is those things like your systems, your IT, maybe your help desk, and different things like that. Well, because I used to run, one of my first jobs out of grad school was running 269 tax offices, and I built the tax offices from the ground up. I understood both, and so I couldn't unlearn something that I had acquired. And even when I moved into human resources later in my career, I still understood the business, because you can't be a good HR business partner if you don't understand the business. And so
Mm-hmm.
she helped me, the mentor helped me to learn when to speak and when not to speak, even when so that you can maintain and acquire the respect of your colleagues without them feeling threatened by you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was some critical information, because a young Karen would have, without her telling me that, I would have offered the information thinking I'm being helpful because I
Yeah.
know the answer. And because I was a new senior leader, they may have thought that I was trying to be a know it all, or coming
Mm-hmm.
for their department, or trying to be a standout, suck up, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, but I needed the partnership of the camaraderie and the relationship of my peers. I needed that more than I needed to show that I was so well rounded in business. And
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
one of the main things that my mentor helped me with, is learning when and when not to speak. It sounds crazy, but
No, but
it is
yeah.
critical to your sustainability and leadership, because you are working as part of a team.
Yeah. So good. Well, Karen, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience before we end our episode?
I think, um, you know, for our women leaders who are working for someone else, who are you're working for an employer, you're not an entrepreneur, you're not working for yourself, I would share with you that you are the pilot of your career, not the co-pilot. And let me just expound on that just a little bit. There was a time in my career where I was the number two person, and the number one person had announced her retirement. And I was told that I was going to get that position because I was the number two person once she retired. So for an entire year, they were handing over tasks to me to get me ready to take on this new role for when my boss retired. Well, a year went by and my boss was still on deck and nobody was talking about why she's not talking about retirement. I didn't know how to start the conversation, so I didn't say anything. And so I went from a happy employee working for this organization to by the time we got to 18 months later,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was an employee who was going to work and didn't know what was going on based on no communication about that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they were scared to tell me that she had miscalculated financially and wasn't financially ready to retire.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So she had delayed her retirement. So they thought that I would leave if they told me that. I ended up leaving anyway because that experience converted me from a happy employee who loved the job to 18 months later, an employee who didn't feel valued, who wasn't being communicated with,
Mm-hmm.
all because they didn't tell me what was going on. And I ended up leaving for a higher up position. So the next level position up for another company. So reflecting about that experience in my career, that was 18 months out of my life I'll never get back. There were some things I could have did differently because I certainly could have approached the conversation myself. Apparently I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't mature enough at that time in my career to do that, or I felt that there was some drawback to doing that because I chose not to do that. But that lead me to coach now my women clients that I acted as a co-pilot in my career when I had sole control. At any given time, I could have did what I did 18 months later, which
Yeah.
is I could have exited exited the company at a higher position somewhere else. Because if I was good for them, I'm going to be good somewhere else.
Yep.
And I could at least have had the conversation. And so the lesson for that is for any woman that don't wait for your employer to hand you your promotion. When you determine that you are ready for the next level, if the opportunity is not readily available, then you seek the marketplace and find a comparable position so that you can use your skill set. Don't waste 18 months out of your life like I did.
Uh,
And I tell all of my clients that story because that happened to me. And for those who work for someone else, I've heard some horror stories of women who were waiting to be picked and promoted, who wasted a lot of time.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I was kind of on that even, I mean, this was been the 80s. I was totally into, I'm going to just take care of myself with this because I couldn't count. It didn't seem to me that within the packaged good companies I was working for, that they really were about diversity and promotion for women. I mean, it just wasn't a thing. So I
Mhm.
went, okay, we're just going to take care of myself, keep moving, keep getting the experience, keep launching the products, keep getting those under your belt. That was my strategy. And it's good to hear you talk about it like that, that it
Mhm.
actually is something about owning it yourself, having your own strategy and being your own pilot. I love that. So, Karen, what would you tell your 20 something self today?
Don't be so goal oriented. So the story behind that is I'm extremely goal oriented, and from the time I was in kindergarten until my 30s, I was going to law school.
Uh,
So I did go to law school. I was in my 30s. I was a non-traditional student, meaning that I worked a full-time job and I was going to law school. And after my first year, my counselor said, so what are you going to do when you practice law? And I was like, I'm not going to practice law. And she was like, what do you mean? And I said, by this time I'm already in senior leadership for human resources. I was like, no, I'm going to continue senior leadership in human resources. And I realized when I said that the only reason why I was in law school was because it had been a goal on my goal list and was the only outstanding goal that I had not accomplished. So I
mm,
was just checking it off to say that I had done it because since kindergarten, I had been saying that I was going to be a lawyer. And so that's how I ended up with my doctorate. So I left law school, ended up getting my doctorate in management and organizational leadership, which is comparable to being a senior leader in HR. But again, I try to be reflective on all that stuff. I try to look at that. So when I withdrew from law school, I was like, okay, Karen, what is the lesson from that? And the lesson from that is that we can pivot at any time.
mhm.
Don't be so goal oriented that you won't totally take a goal off of your list if it does no longer serve you.
I love it. I love it. Wow. Well, that must have been something though for you to make that kind of pivot.
Well, it was a crazy pivot if you talk to some people in my family because, like, you got all the way to law school. You couldn't figure that out before law school, but it took me. I just think that my walk is my walk, and I have to walk my walk. That's how I learn my lessons.
Yeah. All of
Like that.
us, all of us are
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you got a chance to go to our online store and there
I
is
did.
something that I can send you. What did you pick?
Brave butterfly, and it says, with brave wings,
You
she flies. I love that.
Oh, you've got that. Well, you definitely are the brave butterfly, a beautiful butterfly. And it's been so wonderful to have you on the show. I think it's your energy, Karen. You've got this radiance that I would love to be in your HR department or in the company that you're in charge of HR because you definitely have that grace and that warmth that you can bring to people. So
Oh,
kudos for you.
thank you for saying that. I really do love people, even when they're not playing nice in the sandbox. I really do love them, and I have been the go-to person all my career. I was the go-to person for people who were higher than me. They would come in my office and close the door and just say, "Can I just talk?" And I guess it's because of my mannerisms, my integrity.
Yeah,
I've showed myself as a confidant and that I really do care about people. And I'm a very honest person. So if you come in my office and close the door, I will tell you if the problem is you. I won't tell you in a public setting among your peers, but if you come in my office and close the door after listening to what you have to say,
yeah,
I'll say, well, couldn't you have done that or said that differently? Or is there what would that, just to help you get to the point that maybe you helped escalate the situation instead of de-escalate the situation. But
definitely. Well, I would put that you're trustworthy, that you definitely people trust you.
I hope
So,
so. Yes.
mm,
Yes.
all right. Well, thank you again for inspiring our audience and coming on the show. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
My sincere thanks to Karen for such a strategic and generous conversation. What I really appreciated most in this episode is the reminder that influence doesn't happen by accident. It's built through reputation, through relationships, through results, and through the courage to speak up for yourself. Here are 3 takeaways to carry with you. 1, Silence is not a superpower. Share your wins. 2, relationships are leadership currency. Invest in them genuinely. And 3, you are the pilot of your career, not the co-pilot waiting to be chosen. Karen's story about waiting 18 months for a promised promotion and then realizing she had full agency all along is such a powerful reminder. No one will steward your career the way you can. And if you'd like to connect with Karen or join her sister leaders community and explore her coaching programs, check out our show notes. Next week, we're shifting from external equity to internal knowing. I'll be joined by Jessica Price Jones, executive coach, leadership expert, and author of Intuition at Work, using your gut feelings to get ahead. Jessica began her career in finance before studying psychology to better understand why some leaders thrive and others falter. She now works globally with senior executives and has served as adjunct faculty at institutions including Cambridge Judge, Chicago Booth, London Business School, and Oxford Said Business. In our conversation, we explore why great leaders don't rely on data alone and how intuition becomes a competitive advantage in complex decision-making. If this week was about building your leadership currency, next week is about trusting your internal compass. As always, thank you for listening, for sharing these conversations with me, and for being part of a community that values courage, clarity, and intention. Until next time, build your reputation, nurture your relationships, and deliver your results. And remember, you don't have to wait to be picked. Talk soon. Bye.